It all begins during an orchestra performance. In the middle of the show, Jeremy receives a message from his classmate Darla, asking him to follow her to a more secluded place. Not really understanding what's going on, he decides to follow her through the hallways until they reach the girls' locker room. Realizing he shouldn't be there, Jeremy starts to get nervous. But just then, Darla approaches him and kisses him unexpectedly. When he opens his eyes again, he notices that something has changed. He no longer feels the same way about her as a friend, so he tries to pull away. Suddenly, all the girls in the locker room start pointing at him and laughing. Jeremy panics and tries to escape, but they quickly catch up to him. Desperate, he begins to scream for help, and just as a woman is about to attack him with a pair of giant scissors, he wakes up in his bed. It had all been a nightmare. Relieved, he gets up and gets ready to go to school. However, during class, he can't help but look at Darla. When she notices, she sends him a note asking him to stop staring at her. This makes him quite uncomfortable, but he tries to go on with his day as usual. Later, Jeremy starts his shift as a delivery boy at the neighborhood grocery store. There, he meets his coworker George, who explains the orders for the day and mentions a new customer. Intrigued, Jeremy checks the address and discovers that the delivery is for a mansion that has been abandoned for a long time. Curious to meet this mysterious client, the young man heads to the location. When he arrives, he knocks on the door and hears a voice from inside telling him to come in. Jeremy enters the house and, as he looks around, he notices a cat staring at him from the dining room. He tries to approach it, even attempts to pet it, but the cat bites his finger and runs off. Shortly after, a mysterious woman appears in front of him, and Jeremy is shocked to realize that she is the same woman he saw in his nightmare with Darla. The woman approaches to apologize for what happened with her pet and, in a very strange way, heals the wound on his finger, leaving Jeremy completely amazed. As if that weren't enough, the woman calls him by his name, and noticing that she never introduced herself, Jeremy feels uneasy and decides it's best to leave. However, before he can go, the woman tells him that she really liked him and invites him to visit her again at nightfall. This leaves Jeremy even more confused, but at the same time, the idea intrigues him. The next day, he tells everything to his friend Ralph, excited. Ralph tells him this is probably the best opportunity he'll ever have, since the woman is not only very beautiful, but also seems completely interested in him. Even so, Jeremy insists that she is the same woman from his nightmares and feels there must be something strange behind all of this. However, Ralph ignores his doubts and tells him that for something so unexpected to happen, maybe it means Jeremy has received some kind of divine help in his love life. At the same time, several nearby students overhear the conversation and agree with Ralph. Seeing that everyone seems to be on the same page, Jeremy begins to doubt himself, and finally decides to go to the meeting. Later, when he arrives at the mansion, he runs into the cat again and decides to follow it, thinking the animal might lead him to the woman. The cat guides him to a room on the second floor, where she finally appears. Meanwhile, Ralph, who stayed outside, sees a white van approaching the house. Realizing his friend might be in danger, he tries to call him, but Jeremy doesn't hear it. Inside the house, Jeremy continues alone with the woman, who finally introduces herself as Nora. At that moment, two mysterious men burst into the house, and confused, Jeremy asks if she was expecting more visitors. However, Nora doesn't respond, and suddenly, she leans in and bites his neck. Right after the bite, two men burst into the room and point their weapons directly at her. Terrified, Jeremy doesn't think twice and runs straight to Ralph's car. As soon as he gets in, his friend speeds off, and they both escape at full speed. One of the men tries to chase them, but ends up falling down the stairs. Even so, before they manage to get away completely, he catches a glimpse of the vehicle and realizes the boys are students from Milton High School. After this, the two return home. Jeremy notices a wound on his neck, but doesn't think too much of it, since, despite everything, he feels like he had an incredible night. Meanwhile, the men eliminate Nora inside her own house, and their next objective is to find the young man. They then get into their van and, before leaving, blow up the mansion. Back at home, Jeremy bandages the wound in the bathroom and tries to go to sleep. However, he starts hearing barking coming from the street and decides to look outside to see what's going on. When he does, he realizes that several dogs are gathered in front of his house, so he uses a slingshot to scare them away. At that moment, he notices a mysterious man watching him from across the street, which makes him nervous, and the man disappears shortly after. The next morning, Jeremy begins to feel strange. His skin is paler than usual, and he has no appetite at all, which keeps him from eating breakfast. Just then, Ralph shows up, but when he finds out his friend isn't feeling well and plans to stay home, he decides to go to school alone. While trying to understand what's happening to him, Jeremy checks his father's newspaper and discovers a shocking headline: Nora's house burned down the night before. Desperate, he decides to go to school anyway, and during the bus ride, he sees the mysterious man again. Worried, he tells Ralph everything: the fire and the feeling that someone is following him. Even though things are getting stranger, they try to stay calm, thinking they haven't done anything wrong and shouldn't have any trouble with the law. Later, after school, Jeremy and Ralph are followed by Grims and Leopold, the same men who got rid of Nora. When they see the white van approaching, Ralph decides to speed up and escape, trying to lose them through the streets. But it doesn't work. Then they come up with an idea: drive past to highway patrol officers. This causes the police to start chasing everyone, allowing the boys to get away for the moment. The next day, Jeremy is working as usual when he notices the mysterious man following him again. Frightened, he tries to run but ends up bumping into Darla and decides to hide with her. The problem is, she doesn't seem to see anyone else and continues shopping as if nothing is wrong. This leaves Jeremy even more confused. Back at home, he tries to make a smoothie in the blender, but suddenly feels a strange attraction to blood. Without understanding why, he puts a piece of meat into the drink, which only worries him more. Not knowing what else to do, he decides to go to sleep. But before he can rest, a mysterious man appears in his room. The man introduces himself as Modak and tells him something shocking: Jeremy is turning into a vampire. Hearing this, Jeremy gets angry and demands that he leave, since he doesn't believe a single word. At that moment, his mother enters the room. Jeremy tries to explain that there's an intruder, but when he looks again, the man has vanished. Confused, he walks over to the window and suddenly comes face to face with a wild wolf, which stares at him for a few seconds before walking away. The next morning, Jeremy runs into Modak again. This time, the man asks him to get into his car, insisting they need to talk seriously. Jeremy hesitates and asks why he should, but Modak explains that if he doesn't treat his condition, the symptoms will only get worse over the next few days. Finally, Jeremy agrees to go with him, while his parents watch worriedly as he gets into a complete stranger's car. During the ride, Modak explains that both of them are what are known as living vampires, which means they don't suffer from the same limitations as other vampires, like being unable to go out in daylight. He also hands Jeremy a notebook filled with notes about vampirism and warns him that, from now on, he must study and understand his new condition, otherwise, things are going to get a lot more complicated. All of this information only makes Jeremy angrier. He refuses to believe what he's hearing and demands that Modak stop the car immediately. But Modak ignores him and keeps talking, revealing that the two people who were chasing them the night before are actually vampire hunters. Without paying attention to Jeremy's complaints, Modak also gives him the card of a trusted butcher, explaining that he can get pig's blood to feed on without doing anything illegal. That's too much for Jeremy, so as soon as he gets the chance, he gets out of the car and takes a bus to school, trying to calm down after everything he just heard. Later, while walking through the hallways, he hears Darla practicing in the music room. He decides to approach her and talk, and ends up telling her about the strange dream he had. To his surprise, Darla seems interested and even excited, so Jeremy, feeling encouraged, asks her out for that same night. Hours later, while getting ready for the date, he tries to shave, but he notices something unsettling. He can no longer see himself in the mirror. Because of that, he ends up cutting his face with the razor. Even so, he decides to go through with his plans and goes to pick Darla up at her house. There, her parents welcome him very enthusiastically since it's their daughter's first date. They even ask them to pose together for a photo, which embarrasses Darla a lot. Meanwhile, her parents start to notice something strange. Jeremy doesn't appear in the pictures. After that, the couple leaves and arrives at a buffet-style pizzeria. But when Darla notices that Jeremy isn't eating anything, she asks the waitress about the ingredients in the pizza. As soon as he hears that it contains garlic, Jeremy realizes that this is another effect of his transformation. So they decide to leave and go somewhere else, where they can talk more calmly and enjoy the rest of the night without any problems. Meanwhile, Ralph is at home, relaxed, dancing to his favorite music, when he suddenly notices that the same pair of criminals is watching him from their van. Nervous, he tries to figure out what to do and decides to go outside with a baseball bat, trying not to be seen. After a while, Leopold gets tired of waiting and decides to take a nap, while Grims keeps watching the house through binoculars. The driver, bored, starts humming, which annoys his boss, who orders him to get out of the vehicle. Taking advantage of that moment, Ralph suddenly appears to confront him. The assistant, thinking Ralph is the vampire, pulls out a crucifix to protect himself. Frightened, he runs back to the van and speeds away from the place. At the same time, Jeremy continues his date with Darla, but suddenly he starts to feel a very strange urge, as if he wants to bite her neck. Confused, he tries to control himself, but when he notices his fangs starting to sharpen, he panics. Without thinking twice, he asks Darla to get out of the car and drives away, leaving her completely confused. Desperate to control what's happening to him, Jeremy decides to go to the butcher shop listed on the card Monik gave him and asks for half a liter of pig's blood. The butcher, realizing he's a rookie vampire, chuckles a bit but still gives him what he asked for. Jeremy quickly returns home, and although he hesitates at first, he finally drinks the blood. And to his surprise, it's not as unpleasant as he had imagined. After finally accepting that he has truly become a vampire, Jeremy starts to feel more and more excited about his new life. He begins consuming large amounts of pig's blood and even invites Monik to spend time with him. During one of their conversations, Jeremy asks why all of this happened to him, and Monik replies that becoming a vampire isn't a curse, but a gift. He then explains that in addition to staying young and having physical abilities far superior to those of normal humans, they can also develop different powers. This excites Jeremy even more, and he starts to see his situation from a completely new perspective. Monik then insists that he must read the vampire journal he gave him in order to learn how to control and use those abilities. The next day, Jeremy goes to school intending to apologize to Darla for what happened on their date. But when he realizes she doesn't want to forgive him, he tries to use his powers to control her mind. The problem is, it doesn't work, and Darla simply walks away, leaving Jeremy feeling pretty embarrassed. Hours later, Ralph leaves a store downtown and runs into the hunters again, who are still watching him. Annoyed by the whole situation, he decides to go to Jeremy's house and confront him, asking why they're following him. At that moment, Jeremy admits he doesn't understand it either, but takes the opportunity to tell him the truth. He has become a vampire. At first, Ralph doesn't believe a word, but Jeremy insists and proves it, first by showing that he has no reflection in the mirror, and then by drinking directly from a bottle of blood he keeps in a mini fridge. Seeing this, Ralph is completely shocked, and not knowing how to react, he decides to leave. Later that night, Jeremy is on the rooftop, looking out over the city, when Monik appears again, this time to say goodbye. He explains that his job is done, that he has guided him through his first steps as a vampire, and that now he must leave to help someone else. Jeremy feels sad and lost. He confesses that he doesn't know what to do with his life and that he feels bad for scaring his best friend. Trying to cheer him up, Modak tells him that he can still fix things, and as a final gesture, he gives him the keys to his car before leaving. This lifts Jeremy's spirits, and he decides to go find Ralph to make things right. At first, his friend is afraid that Jeremy might hurt him, but Jeremy assures him that's not the case. After talking for a while, they manage to reconcile and become friends again. Feeling more at ease, the two decide to go out and have some fun, heading to a rock club in the city with the idea of talking to some girls. To help Ralph, Jeremy tries to use his powers to impress a girl at the club, creating some kind of illusion. But something goes wrong, and instead of affecting the girl, it ends up affecting Grims, one of the hunters. Unaware of this, Ralph keeps trying to approach different girls without much success, until he asks Jeremy for help once again. Encouraged, he walks over to a girl in the middle of the dance floor. At that moment, Grims, under the effect of the illusion, approaches Ralph and starts dancing with him, which leaves Jeremy confused when he realizes his power has affected the wrong person. At the same time, Leopold prepares to shoot Ralph, but Grimm stops him, which enrages his boss. As a result, the shot ends up hitting one of the speakers, drawing the attention of the security guard. To avoid trouble, Leopold hands his crossbow to Grims, and the guard ends up kicking Grims out of the club. Taking advantage of the chaos, Jeremy and Ralph decide to leave the club and head to a quieter restaurant. There, they run into Darla, who is hanging out with her friends. Wanting to fix things, Jeremy approaches her to apologize for everything he did earlier. But in the middle of the conversation, something unexpected happens. Ralph is captured by the hunters, who quickly take him away. Realizing what just happened, Jeremy doesn't hesitate and asks Darla to come with him. Together, they run out and start chasing the men's van. As the hunters prepare to finish off Ralph during the pursuit, Jeremy decides to tell Darla the whole truth, explaining everything he's been going through since he became a vampire. As they continue following the hunters, several patrol cars begin to appear on the road, and in the middle of the chaos, an accident occurs that ends up stopping Jeremy and Darla. No matter how hard he tries to explain the situation, Jeremy is eventually locked inside one of the patrol cars, completely desperate at the thought that Ralph might be eliminated. But Darla isn't willing to give up. She grabs the wheel and continues the chase on her own. This surprises Jeremy, who quickly moves to the front seat and uses the vehicle's radio to call for backup from the station. He even takes the chance to speak to his parents, knowing they're listening, and assures them that, even though everything seems like a disaster, none of this is his fault. Hearing this, his parents grow worried and decide to help him. Shortly after, the hunters stop at an abandoned church with the intention of eliminating Ralph. Leopold orders Grims to do it, saying he needs to learn how to behave like a real hunter. But Grims doesn't have the courage, and just as Leopold is about to step in, Jeremy arrives to stop them. At that moment, Leopold hesitates and decides to check whether Ralph is actually a vampire. After testing him, he realizes they were wrong, which disappoints him, so they decide to let him go. Relieved to be saved, Ralph runs to hug Jeremy, but since he's wearing a garlic necklace, he accidentally hurts him. This makes the hunters realize the truth. Jeremy is the real vampire. Once discovered, Jeremy, Darla, and Ralph run off and escape toward an old cemetery. However, the hunters quickly surround them. To protect his friends, Jeremy confronts Leopold, lifting him off the ground with his bare hands and demanding that he stop chasing them. He warns him that this is the only time he'll let him go, and that if they cross paths again, there will be consequences. But Leopold isn't willing to back down. Just as the situation is about to get worse, Noria appears alongside Modak. She reveals that she was able to return thanks to her vampire condition, and at that moment, Modak calls for help. Suddenly, a group of female vampires appears and takes Leopold away, forcing him to join them. With this, their greatest enemy is finally out of the way. After everything that happened, the vampires prepare to leave, and Jeremy says goodbye to Modak, who feels proud of what he has achieved. Shortly after, Jeremy watches as Modak, transformed into a wolf, leaves the city. Before leaving the area, Ralph takes the chance to scare Grims, who runs away in panic while being chased by police cars. Finally, Jeremy reunites with his parents, who are relieved to see that he's safe. After such a chaotic night, everything finally seems to have come to an end. Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what you think about this movie.